Welcome to a special edition of the CK Podcast here on the Basketball Zone YouTube channel. I'm your host, Leo Biaz, and today we have a very special guest, my boy Jeffrey Key from the #1 content page on the G League on Instagram, G League TV. My man, how you doing? Thank you so much for joining the show.
Leo, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I've been following your page for a long time, man. I love what you're doing, and I love your passion for the Kings as well.
Thank you, because we're going to need it, man. It's been a lot of years without making the playoffs, lots of patience. And I said, why not? Let's expand, Cowboy Kingdom more into more of a basketball zone, general consensus type page. We're kind of starting not from zero, but we have our following from the Kings, and we're little by little growing in. We got a lot of Rockets fans now because they love Jalen Green, and we've been talking about Jalen Green a lot, which we'll touch on once again. He has a huge following. I did a Jalen Green chosen video, and I think it's like at 21,000 views right now. So
Wow.
it's growing, and I realized the Rockets Nation is huge, and they did a phenomenal job in the draft, drafting 4 guys who I loved, and we'll touch on that too. But first and foremost, man, what are some of the storylines that you're looking forward to in the NBA this upcoming season?
Yeah, there's a ton. I think, just me being so invested in the G League, a lot of the storylines that I'm, concerned with are revolving around G Leaguers and former G League alum and stuff like that. So, the main one is like the Houston Rockets, which is the fan base that I have on my page, and also just young fans in general, I think are gravitating so much toward that team. Me for myself, not only for Jalen Green, but they also have Kevin Porter, who they brought up last year from the Vipers,
100%.
and then they're just surrounded by, other than those two who are the headliners, Jalen and Kevin. Christian Wood is a guy who spent 4 years in the G League and kind of started from the bottom, working his way, averaging like 2 points as a rookie, and then 8 points to 12 points. Just gradually climbing the ladder and becoming a fringe all-star. I think last year, if the Rockets were a little bit better,
100%.
Christian Wood was a guy averaging 20 and 10. And then you surround him with guys like Kyrie Thomas, Armani Brooks. This is like as G League heavy of a team as there is in the NBA, and that's really like the teams that I follow are the teams that have the most call-ups, of course, like everybody's interested in the LeBrons, everyone's interested in like the Giannis's too. But the guys that it's weird because like a lot of the basketball pages, as they feature those guys like the Stephs, the Giannis's. The Steph and Giannis of my page is like the Jalen Green, the Kevin Porter.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like guys like Alize Johnson, right? So other G League guys. So I think it's like, the storylines are the Rockets, how are their young core going to fit in? I know we were talking about this a little before we started. Like, how is Jonathan Kuminga going to fit in with the Golden State Warriors? They're looking as locked and loaded as ever right now. And they're in a position where Clay's coming back and they want to win. And so Jonathan is 19 years. I'm sorry, he's 18 years old. He's 18 years old. 1 year in the G League. He's a young pup on a team of guys who are all 30 plus. You know what I mean? And he's gonna, it's not like it's going to be for Jalen where he goes to the Rockets and he's going to get the green light right away. Kuminga might have to, split the pine a little bit. What I'm saying? He'll just probably have to come in and maybe get 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, but it's not going to be like it is for Jalen where he's going to be getting 35 plus minutes. And so, yeah, all the storylines, I'm a semi-Bulls fan now because they have Alex Caruso, they have Alize Johnson, they just signed Tyler Cook, so they got a ton of G Leaguers as well. And so Derrick Jones Jr. as well. So, my storylines are probably different from the average NBA fan storylines just because they don't revolve around the biggest names. They just revolve around kind of the biggest names in the G League.
You touched on a lot of things right there. You touched on Jalen Green and Kevin Porter, which I want to get into that dynamic and how you think it'll translate into more wins or more of a stats type, box score type stuff, highlights type of a duo, or will it be a winning recipe? And the other thing is Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. Do you see Kuminga having a larger impact than Moses Moody, or do you see Moody getting more of the minutes?
Yeah, those are two great questions. As far as the Rockets go, I have a feeling that it's going to be exciting ball. It's going to be you have two guys who are some of the best, it might be as exciting of a backcourt as we have in the NBA right now with Jalen Green and KPJ, but it could also be a situation where we've seen like with the early Clippers when they had like Darius Miles and Quentin Richardson and
Hmm.
Lamar Odom, where they were throwing Andre Miller too, where they're throwing oops to each other and they're making Sports Center highlights for fast break dunks and things of that nature. But does it result in wins? And both of those guys are so young. I mean, Kevin Porter's 20, um,
Right.
Jalen Green's 18, 19, right? So you have all these guys who are just, in my opinion, they're still like kids. They're still in their early. I mean, they should be sophomores or juniors in college right now. And so I think it's going to take a couple of years for them to really develop. And we've seen that with other NBA players, where even like Alonzo Ball, where Alonzo, it took him, 2, 3 years to kind of form, could become the player that he is today in the NBA. And in those early years when he wasn't producing for LA, a lot of people wrote him off saying that he was not necessarily a bust, but he wasn't going to be nearly as good as projected to be from being the number 2 pick.
But Bleacher
And so
Report having him over De'Aaron Fox this past week was just ridiculous, right?
having
Like,
Lonzo over,
yeah,
yeah,
like
right,
he
right.
he ranked they ranked him fourth and De'Aaron Fox sixth, which is
I don't even watch
laughable.
these Bleacher Reports or those Bleacher Report rankings or anything like that because I just know it's going to piss me off.
Yeah.
But with Jalen and KPJ, it could take a couple years. When I think the Rockets, the good thing is that they're fully invested in you know developing these young guys and just making sure that they have all the opportunity to succeed because they're getting they're going parting ways with John Wall. We'll see what happens with Eric Gordon. And then as far as Kuminga goes, it's tough because you know they're getting a guy who's been compared to Kawhi Leonard, right? And as we see with Kawhi, he didn't start off as a star. He
No.
he came on a really deep Spurs team, and he kind of had to, well, not necessarily work his way into the rotation. He was always in the rotation, but he had to. It took him maybe 3, 4 years to develop into that star we know him as today. And the Warriors are just so deep at that forward position. I mean, we're talking about like um,
Andrew
Andre Iguodala
Wiggins.
coming back, Draymond Green,
Mhm.
Andrew Wiggins, and so they have all these guys, and so yeah, he's 18 years old. He could have a rookie year where he averages like 7, 8 points a game. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think he's going to come out of the gates and just start getting 15. He had a great summer league where he was getting close to 20 a game. And I know people hype up summer league, and if you're averaging 25 or 22 in the summer
Right.
league, that doesn't mean you're
No.
gonna be averaging that in the NBA. But yeah, he could have a little bit of some growing pains, and that's just part of the process and what it takes for a lot of these guys to be good players because he's in a unique situation where he's a lottery pick, but he's not drafted to the usual lottery team where they're rebuilding around these young stars.
So the Houston Rockets drafted Jalen Green, number 2 pick. Then they went Alperen Sengun at I think 16. Then they
Hmm.
went Garuba, and they went the kid from Arizona State, Josh. Oh man, I'm still on his name right
Oh,
now.
Josh Christopher.
Josh Christopher, right? What did you think of the overall draft, and how fast do you think this rebuild will translate into wins and put the Rockets back where they really were for the last decade, with James Harden being the main guy and always putting that team on the map in terms of being relevant?
Yeah, that's a great question. It just there's a lot of fans that think that this team is built to win right away,
Hmm.
and it's like I said before, it's just hard with these guys being 19 to 21 years old. It's going to take a few years, I think, until they're in playoff contention. They're going to make some great highlights, and I know that, the better that some of these guys do, whether it's Christian or Jalen or Kevin or Amani, the better they do in the NBA is better for the brand of the G League too. But yeah, I would give it maybe like 3 years. I mean, even when James Harden went to the Rockets, he was already what 3, 4 years in the league. He
Hmm.
was just coming off of his winning Six Man of the Year and a finals run. So it's not like he was coming in, and he played what 3 years of college too. So he wasn't coming in as a 19-year-old kid with barely any experience. And then remember also, like yeah, Jalen, he's technically been a pro for a year, but the G League season last year was only 15 games, right? So he was in that G League bubble for a month and a half, and then he played summer league, right? So he didn't play nearly as much as he would have if he had played at one of these, high major college programs where you're playing 30 games and then you're also playing in the tournament.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, even him, he's like super inexperienced. Kevin Porter Jr. also super inexperienced. 2 years in the league, 1 year at USC. He really only played maybe, I think it was 26 games in the NBA last year. So it wasn't even that many. And he balled out in those 26 games. But he's another guy where a lot of people were mad at his 2K rating. He got a 70, I think 77. And
Yeah.
but people made a good point. It's like, yeah, it's a small sample size, right? And so we haven't really seen as much of him as there is to see, and we don't know exactly how that's going to pan out in a larger portion of games.
Very well said. I want to talk about what you do now, the G League TV, Instagram, and Twitter now. How did you start this, man? What sparked the idea, and how do you find all these creative ways to stay relevant? Because I imagine myself, I'm like, oh, well, with the Kings, there's only so much you can talk about when they're losing for so long because people lose interest. But when I look at your channel, your page, it just seems like you always come up with something that's interesting that will spark debate, conversations. Like I think 62-year-old guy who's trying out for the G League. I'm like, damn, like Jeffrey is on his game every single day.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I started last year. So I've been following the G League and been a huge fan since about 2015.
Hmm.
And just long story short, like I started going to Delaware 87ers games, who are now the Blue Coats.
Hmm.
And so I started going to their games, and tickets are like $10,
Right.
Tickets are $10. The great thing, those who are watching, like if you go to a G League game, I'm telling you, you can have as much access to players and stuff like that as you want that you won't get at an NBA game.
Right.
Tickets are super cheap. What I usually do is I buy the cheapest ticket and then I'll just move down.
Yep.
Security is not going to stop you after games. You can just wait outside the locker room and talk to the players and stuff like that. But so I kind of fell in love with like that brand of basketball because of that, like the access to players, the fact that it was like very family friendly environment. It was at the time in 2015, it was like not very talked about. It wasn't mainstream at all, and so I kind of just gravitated because nobody else was a G League fan.
Hmm.
And so as the G League has grown, last year when kind of COVID started and there was nothing to do, I was like, you know what, man? Like, there's so many basketball pages out there, and they kind of just recycle the same
Yeah.
LeBron content, the same Dame Lillard
Right.
content, and these other guys, thousands of other guys, hundreds of other guys who are playing basketball at a super high level that no one really knows about. And so it was just a way to kind of like, for me, I had a basketball page before that only got maybe like 400 followers. So I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, if I post these highlights and I can get 2,000 followers or so, that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
And it's grown to about like 45,000 now, and in about a year and a half. And I'm just hoping that as the G League keeps expanding, the page will keep expanding. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun just like uh, digging up old memories of the G League too, because there's a lot of years. The league has been around since 2001, so we're approaching the 20th anniversary of the league, and I would say for the first 15 years, no one really knows too much about it. And so those
100%.
were the days where the games were streamed on YouTube, the games were streamed on Facebook, and I remember you can look at the view count, and you would have like 300 people tuned in.
Yeah.
A couple years ago they were streamed on Twitch. You can look at the view count too, and it was in the hundreds or not even thousands, definitely not tens of thousands. So yeah, these games just went super under the radar. These players went under the radar, and I've been having just a lot of fun kind of bringing that to light.
So what's the next step in terms of how are you going to monetize this? Because you have a platform now, you have a strong audience. What's your plans on taking it to the next level? Are you going to start your own podcast? What's in the future for Jeffrey?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one is like expanding to other platforms,
Hmm.
and the biggest thing for me is I love Instagram.
Hmm.
I like Twitter. I haven't before this. I had a Twitter account. I still have a personal Twitter account that I just use to retweet stuff, just like
Hmm.
funny memes and stuff like that. But I was never one to really like just tweet myself. So I
Right.
did start the G League TV Twitter page, which I'm trying to grow over there too. going to try to grow on TikTok and posting, short little clips and stuff like that. And also kind of just putting myself out there as well, with not necessarily a podcast, but more like a video podcast. I'm kind of inspired by Duncan Robinson. I watch his. I guess it's considered a podcast because it's an audio form too, but they do the YouTube version as well. And so I've been kind of inspired by that and having guests on that, because people, I guess some people would listen to me talk about the G League, but
Yeah.
they would love it even more if I had players on and talk about their experiences from different eras. And, I love listening to the players talk about the early D League days or NBDL days, because
Hmm.
there was no money in the D League back then. And you had players like staying in, all these crappy hotels, and,
Yeah.
instead of flying, and taking flights from city to city, they were taking 14, 15 hour
Buses.
bus rides,
Yeah.
and stories like that are really cool, because it kind of just shows how much it's grown. In its league's been around 20 years, so in 20 years or so, and it's going to be curious. I'm curious to see how it continues to grow within the next 10 years or so. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, just expanding over those different platforms, and then putting myself a little bit out there as well with the video cast would be cool for the next steps.
Love it, love it. I remember when I was in college at the University of Nevada, Reno, I was covering the Bighorns,
Yeah.
and they would always ask me, "What's the difference in terms of talent?" And honestly, I always tell people, there is an abundance of NBA talent every single night in the D League and now G League. But the big difference to me, just by observing, watching, analyzing, and having conversations with some of these younger prospects, was the mental state of basketball, like the mental side of basketball. I don't think they were all consummate professionals, because there are guys in the league today, and it's not to knock a guy like Anthony Tolliver, right, who finds a way to come back to the league. He's a consummate pro. Coaches love him because he understands his role, and that's what a lot of these kids in the G League don't understand, because they were the stars in college, right? And it's more of an ego, again, are you there mentally? Because basketball is mental for the most part. And to me, it's not a huge drop off in talent, because it's not. You have guys like Pierre Jackson, who is just a scoring machine, can score on anybody, right? But to me, it's more of the mental side of it, because there's a lot of NBA players from a talent perspective that shouldn't be there, but they are there because they play their roles exceptionally well. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I agree 1,000%. It's weird because every year you find players are averaging 20 plus, even in the 23, 24, 25 points per game range. And they're putting up these crazy numbers, and their highlight reels look great, but they don't get the call ups. Or if they do get a
Hmm.
call up, it might be a 10-day here, a 10-day there, and they're barely playing. And then you find these other guys who are putting in, 13, 14 a game. Um, on paper, it doesn't look as appealing, but these are the guys that are getting the two ways, right? These are the guys that are getting the 10 days, which are converted to multi year deals. And so it's not necessarily, and I've talked about this on my page too, it's really not about who can fill up the box score the most. It's like who can who can fill in a role, and who can come in as like the 10th to the 13th man off the bench and provide good minutes for a limited amount of time. And so, and we saw
Hmm.
that with my favorite two are Armani Brooks and Alize Johnson. Armani was averaging. I mean, he had a good year in the G League, like 15 points a game. He led the G League in 3 pointers made, but all the attention went to Kevin Porter Jr. Right, and it was kind of the guy who, when Kevin Porter would get double teamed, or when he would drive the lane and the defense would collapse on him, he'd kick it out to Armani. But Armani is more than just a catch and shoot guy. He can score off the dribble. He's even like a very good surprise. Surprisingly, he's a very good athlete. And so he's a guy that can fit onto any roster right now. And if you have him in the corner, or you just give him the ball and just say, "Hey, we need a bucket," he's a guy that can get you 9 points in 12 minutes. Alize Johnson is just a guy, and same with Emmanuel Terry, who was on the Kings summer league
Hmm.
roster this year.
I love
He's a
that
guy,
guy, man. Oh my
dude,
gosh, he reminds me
right?
of Rashawn Holmes.
Yeah, very much, right. Two guys, Alize, and Emmanuel, who would just come in, and whether it's 15 minutes, could get you 9 rebounds in 15 minutes. Don't even have to score. And so these are guys that are just going to compete hard on defense. They can guard multiple positions because even as bigs, they're kind of they're pretty mobile. And so yeah, it's really kind of just about who's going to fill the gaps. A couple years ago, Frank Mason was in the
That's my
NBA.
guy too.
Yeah, I love Frank, and I met Frank one time at the Basketball Hall of Fame. Really nice guy. But he was the G League MVP a couple years ago.
He was.
He averaged 25 points per game in the Wisconsin. And it's kind of crazy to see like a guy like him who's putting up all these crazy numbers not find a home in the league. And I know he had an injury last year too, which factored in as well. But yeah, it's not necessarily about the stats. More it is about whose game translates best to the NBA. Like you talked about, who is professional. Because if we're bringing these guys on two ways for 10 days, they don't want to have players that are causing a scene in the locker room
Right.
or anything like that. So you do want character guys as well. But all that combined is really what makes for a good call up, not necessarily the guy that can get you 32 points per game.
Can't say it any better, man. Can't say it any better. And I tell these people this: everybody's not Kevin Porter Jr. Like, we all saw the gooing talent and some of the problems that he had in the locker room. But let's be honest, Frank Mason isn't KPJ, and
Right.
and all these other guys aren't that type of talent. So that type of talent, unfortunately and fortunately, they get a lot of leeway. They get second opportunities, and these other guys who are fringe, they got to be on their A games, and they have to be the consummate professional that coaches and front offices look for all the time. And that's the difference between Anthony Tolliver, again, not to pick on Andy because I love AT, great investor, already thinking outside of basketball, has an abundance of investments. He's that type of guy. Very good education, right, from Cragen. And I just hope that this new wave take some of these avenues, which is my next topic, and this is one that both you and I will enjoy, is which route should you take, the G League or college? I feel like these kids nowadays with social media and all of the financial literacy that is free in terms of education, they can take their games and whatever money they make, put it towards investments. So because my first feature story in 2013 when I started covering the league was how athletes go broke after like 5 years of retirement, right? That needs
Right.
to stop. And these kids who are fringe G leaguers who are getting paid a little bit more now, they need to be able to invest and not just depend on basketball solely. So that's one of the things that I encourage and I hope to see progress in the near future. But again, I don't know if you want to touch on that or not. But next question is, should the fringe NBA or not? Should the fringe high school athlete take the G League route or the G League route for money or for education purposes? Like, what's your idea on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say if you're not, well, first off, the G League and also the new overtime league, they're really only recruiting the best of the best. I actually had a phone call conversation. It was weird. A guy, a high schooler who was a
Mm-hmm.
four-star prospect, hit me up and asked me about the G League Ignite team.
Right.
And I don't work for the Ignite or anything like that, so I told him the information that I knew about it and stuff like that. But I looked him up on Rivals and on ESPN, and he was a top 100 guy, but he was kind of more towards the bottom, like the 70 range
Right.
in the top 100. And I told him a guy like him should be considering college, not the G League. And I'm not even so sure that the G League would even reach out to a guy like him, because they are really only looking for the top prospects, whether they're in high school currently or they're overseas.
Right.
As we seen with Kai Soda, who eventually didn't end up playing for the G League, or like Principal Singh, guys like that who um, are the best of the best from their
The
country.
Australian kid that you just posted about,
Yeah,
right? He's
that's
he's
right,
18.
right. Yeah, so like the top of the top, exactly. And so, but as far as the five stars go, it's a tough situation because I would say last year the G League definitely had the upper hand, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
giving out, $500,000 contracts, which is good money. It doesn't even compare to what they might make in the NBA
Right.
off not only their game contracts but also sponsorships. But being 18 years old, 17 years old, and signing $500,000, I mean, for anybody that age, you're rich. And so,
Yeah.
not only that, but there's a lot of appealing things about the G League, whether it's the money or whether it's the fact that it's you're not going to be playing a full G League schedule. It's mostly like training and development, and then you might have like 20 games or so, which you play against other G League teams and other exhibition games and stuff like that. So it's not just simply like they're. It's weird. They're part of the G League, but they're not 100% part of the G League. Like
Mm-hmm.
last year, they compete in the bubble. They compete as any other G League team, but traditionally, they're not supposed to be doing that. It's more just about their personal growth and progression as athletes and as people too. They do allow them to take classes and things of that nature. I don't know if these guys want to take classes. You know what I mean? Like they have that option to do so, but one thing I talked about with you before is like I think that there's a benefit of going to college too and being a 5 star and getting that 1 year in. You know, for me, going to college, it was a great time. And I can't imagine what it would be for me if I was a 5 star athlete. Right? It just, of course, there's some things that could distract you, but there's things that can distract you anyways. And if you're going to
For
be
sure.
a good ball player, and if you're really focused on what you need to focus on, you're going to be able to kind of navigate through that and be able to balance that, right? Whereas maybe the ones who are not as focused on their game won't be. But going to college for a year, when you go to these high top tier colleges, you're really going to a professional program in itself, right? So like when you're going to Kentucky, Calipari is running his program like it's a pro program, right?
For sure.
If you're going to UCLA or if you're going to Oregon, right, you're going to a place where, hey, listen, like you might be considered a quote unquote amateur, right, at the NCAA level, but the way that you're treated, and the way that the expectations your coach has for you is like for you to act like a pro, right? And so you're not going to a place to goof off. You have to be, on your game in order to succeed there. And so there's pros and cons to both. And now that the NCAA is allowing players to make money off of their image, these
Mm-hmm.
guys can make $500,000 easy. These top tier guys, these like lower tier, definitely not. But
Yeah.
if Jalen was in college, right, and let's say if Jalen was in college and wherever he wanted to play, or like Isaiah Todd, he had signed with Michigan at one point. If Isaiah Todd went to Michigan, put up crazy numbers, and then went on an insane run in the NCAA tournament, oh, his marketability would be through the roof, And like last year, if Jalen Suggs was allowed to make money or Johnny Juzang was allowed to make money, oh
Wow.
my God, during that 3 week span or whatever, they would have really cashed out in the best way possible. And so yeah, it's definitely a toss up. I think it just comes down to like what you value, right? With the G League, it could be like, um, do you value like the guaranteed fast money right now? With the college, it could be like, do you want that experience of being in the college atmosphere? Because there's no atmosphere like college atmosphere, right?
Yeah.
And you're certainly not going to get that at a G League game.
No.
Um,
Not
and then like
yet. Not yet.
not yet, right? Not yet. But even when the Ignite would come to town, like the only G League game I ever went to that was sold out was when Taco Fall came to town, and it was the Blue Coats playing the Red Claws, and that was the only game I ever went to where it was like packed. All the other games, you might, especially if it's like a day game or something like that, you might have like a couple hundred people there. So
To
there's
be
nothing
fair, though,
like
Jalen Green played in the bubble where we had no fans. So I'm
yeah,
curious to see what it would have been like if Jalen or Zion, right, would headline a
right.
game. I I can pretty much bet that these arenas would have been packed.
Yeah, I can see that too. I can see that too. But then again, you're not playing in also huge arenas, right? So you're playing in
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
if like the Blue Coats arena might seat like 5,000,
Right.
so whereas if you're playing in the tournament, you're basically playing like a stadium, right? And
Yeah,
so
no doubt.
um
In Stockton,
same
though,
thing.
in Stockton fits 10,000 people.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So but yeah, it's like it's I think it just comes down to like what you value. I think
Yeah.
going to college is super valuable too, getting that year in and then eventually maybe going back to get your degree is useful, right? But it just depends on like how good the player is. The good thing now is that they don't have to go to Australia anymore to
Right.
make their money, right?
Right.
Whereas we saw with like LaMelo a couple years ago, where he went overseas to get 500,000. It's like now he could go to just in his backyard and get
Yeah.
$500,000. And so, yeah, there's certainly
Brandon Jennings was, I would say, the first dude, right? To.
yeah. Brand James was the first. R.J. Hampton also went
Yep.
to Australia too. And so, but the reason why they went to Australia, I bet you if the Ignite program was around when they were making that decision, there's a good chance they would have chosen the Ignite.
No doubt.
And so it does give them that second option. But yeah, it would be a toss up for me, man. If I was in that position, I don't know, man. I don't know what I would choose because I think college is very valuable, but then also it's like 500,000 like guaranteed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's hard to pass up on.
And not everybody made 500K, right? That went to the Ignite.
It was all around that. I think like the lowest paid was like
Oh
300,000.
wow, okay, that's
Yeah.
good then.
Yeah. And
That's
so
good then.
and then Scoot Henderson, who's going to be on the Ignite team next year, signed I think it was 2 years, a million,
Holy
so
moly!
because he actually was in the class of 2022. So he's going to have to spend 2 years on the Ignite. And so he signed, I believe it was a seven-figure deal, which was crazy. I mean, he just turned 17, so
Holy
and
moly!
he's yeah, so man, you put that type of money in my hands and I was that age, I don't know what
Yeah.
I would do, man.
Right.
I'd have all the iced out watches just like all the rappers,
Right.
if I had that
Right. But
opportunity.
I think that could lead into this conversation, which is financial literacy. Once again, what is a G League doing right now to educate these prospects to not go and buy all these, maybe one iced watch and not like five or like five cars, but like one car?
Right.
Like save this money aside for whatever reasons. Invest it now, start early. Are they giving these opportunities, these types of resources to these prospects?
Yeah, actually that was one of the big draws um that the Ignite program was going to have financial literacy classes
Okay.
for these players. And the thing is that, you can put these players through these classes because they have the same thing for the NFL where they have like the rookie symposiums or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they try to teach financial literacy. It's like, yeah, you can have these classes and stuff like that, but man, once you get these players like who are young and they want to flex, that they have millions of followers on Instagram, it's hard for them to take what they've learned in those classes and really put it to use. And
Right.
so, I couldn't imagine, like I said, being Jalen Green or being Kuminga, being 18, 19 years old, and then someone gives you seven figures and they say, don't spend it. You're thinking, I'm going to have a 15-year career in the NBA, right? So, like, these checks are going to keep coming. So, even if I squander my first, in 2 weeks or in a month, I'll have another one. And so, it's really hard for them to be that age and to. I'm hoping that some of them do take what they've learned, and I'm
Right.
sure it is very useful. It's just hard at that age to put that into consideration.
All right. So before I let you go and be respectful of your time, what is there an athlete or maybe two or three guys in the upcoming classes that are just wowzers and you have your eye on?
Yeah, for sure. So on the Ignite team next year, we're gonna have the Hardy brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So Jaden Hardy he's a 6'5" combo guard. He's as good of a scorer as we'll probably have, as there probably is in high school basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was the number 2 overall ranked player in high school. Um, he averaged, I think it was 39 and 8 assists.
Right.
30 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists as a junior, and then unfortunately had to skip his senior season because of COVID, so it got canceled. But he is an unbelievable offensive talent. He's been another guy compared to Bradley Beal.
Right.
Just can shoot from 35 plus feet. He's and athletic too, and so I know they've compared Jalen Green to Bradley Beal, but if there's anybody that can be compared to Bradley, it's this guy Jaden Hardy, and then
Wow.
his brother Amari Hardy is joining the team, and he's an interesting prospect because he's 4 years older. He went to 4 years of college, and so he's the
Whoa.
first Ignite player to have played in college and then to be signed straight out of college. And I think a lot of it has to do with like the development of his brother too.
Mm-hmm.
His brother, super young, 17 years old, 18 years old, so he can be there to kind of mentor him, and be with him to kind of guide him in what it takes to be a pro. And I think Amari is trying to get to that pro level too. He had some really good years at UNLV. Didn't play as much at Oregon, but is a superb athlete, and he's another guy to be on the lookout for. I could see him, having a decent season in the G League, and then him being a guy who maybe plays another year or two in the G League and hopefully gets a call up. And then there's the one I'm super interested in seeing is Dyson Daniels, who's the Australian prospect, and he and Josh Giddey were the kind of the two main guys, but he's a year younger than Josh is. And he's 6'6", super poised. He's super long as well, and so he's a guy that loves to like score in transition, loves to get to the cup. And these international prospects are interesting because it's like we don't really hear about them until they either get to the NBA or get to the G League, right? And so, there's some film to watch on them, and I guess you can kind of say their scouting reports and stuff like that. But there's a lot of question marks around these guys and how good they're going to be. And we don't really have the access and the ability to watch them overseas as we do. We will, hopefully in the up and coming years in the NBA. But those guys are, some of the intriguing ones. And then there's Michael Foster, who's another G Leaguer, another Ignite guy. He signed maybe like 3 or 4 months ago, 6'8", 6'9", super athletic, and he's been compared to Julius Randle. And if you look at his body structure, he's 18 years old, but he already has the body structure of a guy like Julius Randle. And then there's Scoot Henderson, who just turned 17, and he's going to be playing 2 years on the Ignite. And so he was another 5-star prospect. He was, I think, the number 7 ranked player in the class of 2022. And so, but yeah, super young. It's probably going to take him a little while to get adjusted. But yeah, the next crop of talent is really, really good. I'm excited to see them. And like I said before, super excited to see how not only Jalen and Kuminga do, but also Isaiah Todd, how he's going to do. He was drafted 31 by the Wizards. And then Daishen Nix, who's also, I forgot to mention him, Daishen Nix, who's on my team, is also on the Rockets, right? And so he's a guy that will probably this year play for the Vipers in the G League, but his rights will still be retained by the Rockets, and eventually he'll get a call-up or two. And then there's, my favorite one, who I didn't even mention, he also was on the Sacramento Kings Summer League team, is Principal Singh. Principal is trying to be the second player of Indian descent to make the NBA. There's Simbular, who actually played for the Kings for a little bit.
Yep, he did. I remember that.
Yeah, and so Simbular was the first, and then and so he's trying to be the second one to ever play in the NBA. And so he was on the G League Ignite team last year, didn't really get much run, only scored 5 total points. But he's a guy that's like super raw. He was the number 1 Indian prospect in the world. And so I don't know what he's going to be doing this year. They haven't announced it, but I could see him playing another year in the G League, getting his body right. Another guy who's super young and has to get a little stronger, has to get a little more confident. But yeah, there's a lot of talent that's coming in and out of the G League that we should be watching out for.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Jeffrey Key from G League TV. Thank you so much, my man. Got to have you on soon because this is all your thing now. I feel like basketball is 365, 24/7, man, and you're doing a great job keeping everybody up to date on the latest, classic runs from back in the day, those D-League days, right? And then now the G League. Bright future, man. I see your channel growing even more in the near future because you have your head on straight on, bro. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one, guys. And if you guys want to see more content like this, make sure you guys subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. Thank you, guys. We'll see you very, very soon. Peace.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, Leo.